What is the HyFlex model of teaching? In this video for instructors, we will look at the key features of the HyFlex lesson, important space and equipment considerations for the instructor, and ideas for engaging all of the students. What defines the HyFlex approach to teaching is that students have three ways in which they can participate in a lesson. One way is to attend the lesson in person, face-to-face, with the instructor and other students. Alternatively, students can choose to join the lesson online, but synchronously through a video conferencing application such as Zoom. Finally, the instructor records the lesson and shares the recording with students, typically by posting it to the course learning management system, such as Canvas, so that later that day or some other day, students have the option to watch a video of the lesson asynchronously, meaning on their own time. This option may be one you reserve just for students who are sick or who have other approved circumstances that prevent them from attending the lesson at its scheduled time. In those cases, sharing a recording of the lesson allows the students to catch up on what they missed so that they don't fall behind in the course. A recording may also be a helpful means for students to review the lesson, perhaps to study. Or you may have the policy that students are welcome to choose never to attend lessons synchronously and to complete everything for the course online, asynchronously, including the lessons. In this case, it is important to incorporate asynchronous activities that allow students to interact with one another, such as online discussion boards within the course learning management system. Whichever attendance policy you choose will depend on whether or not students need to join the lessons synchronously in order to achieve the learning outcomes of the course. So, offering these three modes as options to students is what makes a course HyFlex. The HyFlex model has been around for quite a while, but became more common with the COVID-19 pandemic as instructors and institutions wanted to offer flexible options for students to attend class. In fact, the word HyFlex is a combination of the words hybrid and flexible because it is a model that combines hybrid modes of learning in a flexible way for students. Now that we know what a HyFlex lesson is, let's take a look at two areas that require special consideration to make this format successful. One is special space and equipment considerations instructors will need to make, and the other is considerations for engaging all students, regardless of the modality they use to participate in the lesson. Let's start with space and equipment. The key considerations to be made with respect to the space and equipment being used are to ensure these three things. Everyone can see, everyone can hear, and everyone can communicate. Let's start by considering what the instructor needs in order to see, hear, and communicate with students. We don't really need to make any special considerations for how the instructor will see, hear, and communicate with the in-person students since the HyFlex format doesn't change how those things occur with those students. So let's focus on the synchronous online students joining via video conference. There are a variety of HyFlex setups, but most often the instructor has a computer logged into the video conference. Sometimes the instructor can see all the online students, and sometimes the instructor has a view of the chat tool open, and if this is the case, it can be difficult to see the online students. And sometimes, if the instructor is in presentation mode within the video conferencing tool, it can be difficult to see very many of the online students. It can also be difficult to view the chat tool. So, while the ideal situation is to be able to see all of your students and to be able to see comments and questions posted to the chat, you can still have a successful HyFlex lesson even if you are unable to see your students or the chat, as long as they can still have a means to communicate with you. Regardless of whether you can see students, they should still be able to communicate with you, and we will get into how in a moment. Still focusing on the instructor and what the instructor can hear, there may be a speaker installed in the classroom that can be connected to the computer that has joined the video conference. In that way, everyone in the classroom, instructor and in-person students, can hear when an online student speaks up. Now, if there is no speaker set up in the classroom, you will need to ensure a different method for online students to communicate, which we will get to. Finally, you, the instructor, need to be able to communicate. The classroom may have a microphone installed to pick up your voice and possibly also that of the in-person students as well. This microphone will be connected to the computer that has joined the video conference. It may be installed in the ceiling, or it may be a lapel mic that you wear by attaching to your clothing. You may also have the chat tool available to use to communicate with online students, perhaps to share links and documents with those students. But avoid typing in the chat too much during the lesson. The in-person students will feel left out every time you turn your attention towards the computer. So next, let's consider what the online synchronous students, those joining via video conference, need in order to see, hear, and communicate, beyond their own computers anyway. In order for these online students to see the instructor and view the lesson, a video camera is often set up in the room facing the front where the instructor and board or screen are located. Sometimes this camera is installed in the ceiling of the room, and sometimes it is set up on a tripod or a desk. The camera typically is connected to the instructor's computer and overrides any built-in camera, such as the computer's webcam. The result for the online students may look a bit like this. Whatever the classroom camera captures will be displayed to students. However, if the instructor decides to enable screen sharing mode within the video conferencing software, students will be able to view whatever is on the instructor's computer screen, whether that be a slide presentation, a web page, or anything else. What about online synchronous students being able to hear? This is a critical aspect of the HyFlex approach. As mentioned before, there should be a microphone set up in the room that, at the very least, captures your voice as you talk. That will allow the online students to hear you. Hopefully that microphone or additional microphones can also capture the voices of the in-person students so that online students can hear their questions and comments. If this is not the case, it is important for the instructor to repeat those questions and comments so that the online students don't miss out. Also, you may want to consider enabling closed captioning in the video conferencing application if it is an available feature. Closed captioning can help if it is difficult for online students to hear or understand you, and it can benefit students with hearing loss, students who are still learning English, or students joining from environments that are noisy or that require a low volume. Finally, online students should have a way of communicating, sharing their own questions and comments. Ideally, there is a speaker set up in the classroom that can project online students' voices to the class. If, however, there is no speaker in the classroom, or for one reason or another, online students cannot be heard, the chat tool will become a key communication tool for online students. However, it can be tricky to manage the chat tool as the instructor, and as mentioned before, it may be difficult to view on your computer screen. In cases where you anticipate relying on the chat tool, it is advised to get a second person to help you. This could be a TA, or if you don't have a TA, it could simply be one of your in-person students who has a laptop with them. Whoever it is, ask the person to keep an eye on the chat tool and to speak up when there is a question or comment posted to the chat. Finally, what considerations need to be made for online asynchronous students, those students who watch a recording of the class lesson after the fact? First of all, we need to make sure the lesson gets recorded. The video conferencing tool will likely have a record function built in so that you can simply record the virtual meeting itself. That means that so long as the synchronous online students are able to see and hear the lesson, your asynchronous students should be able to as well through the recording. That means online asynchronous students will be able to see and hear what they need to. But what about communication? If a student is watching a recording of the lesson after it has taken place, they won't be able to communicate during the lesson. For that reason, consider setting up a discussion board in your online course where students can go to post questions and comments about the lesson or anything else related to the course. This could be a student-to-student discussion, perhaps a required activity for all students to complete over the course of a week. Or it could be as simple as providing a general course questions discussion board where you, the instructor, respond to any student questions or comments that are posted throughout the term. Finally, be sure you know how to contact your institution's Office for Education Technology. They can let you know what equipment the classroom is set up with, whether you will need to bring in your own laptop, and if you should bring certain cables and dongles to connect your laptop to the equipment. Their phone number is good to have on hand in case you need some urgent technology help during a class lesson. Next, let's talk about how to engage all of your students when there are 3 ways in which they might be involved in the lesson. First of all, do make sure you regularly check in with your online students in addition to your in-person students, especially if you are unable to see or hear your online students. If you decide to have in-person students engage in an activity, be sure to also consider how online students can participate. We'll touch on 3 activities you might consider that engage all students in a HyFlex lesson. One is to use an external polling application that everyone has access to. Many polling applications have free options and multiple ways for students to participate. Most will allow you to ask students multiple choice questions, but you may find other options such as free response, where students can share open-ended responses, word clouds, where students' short responses are organized by the frequency of a given response, polls, where students rank order a set of choices, and more. Writing is another activity that works well for HyFlex lessons. Writing can be completed on paper or typed on a computer. There is a large range of different writing activities serving different purposes, but a few you might consider are the 1-minute paper, which can serve as a warm-up activity for students to activate their prior knowledge about the lesson's topic. Pause and reflect, which gives students a break during a lesson to process their understanding up to that point, which can help students realize holes in their understanding. Or muddiest point, completed at the end of a lesson, that encourages students to identify which elements of a lesson are still unclear and should be followed up on. Digital whiteboards are a great tool for students to share ideas and to brainstorm. Let's go over the key takeaways of this video. The HyFlex approach to teaching gives students 3 ways to participate in a lesson: in person, online synchronous, and online asynchronous. HyFlex teaching requires you to consider how everyone will see, how everyone will hear, and how everyone will communicate. And do remember to check in with your online students as you do the in-person students. Enlist the help of a TA or another student to communicate with your online students if needed. HyFlex teaching can be a lot to manage, so don't hesitate to use the help available to you. And be familiar with how you can get tech help if needed. Make use of asynchronous activities through the course learning management system as needed to engage all students. And consider incorporating activities that all students, regardless of modality, can engage in, such as external polling applications, writing, and digital whiteboards. Before you go, take a moment to pause and reflect on what you have learned. What are the key takeaways to know about HyFlex teaching?